Josh Williams will join Kaulig Racing in 2024. Jake Garcia will join ThorSport Racing in 2024. And Zane Smith's number has been officially revealed for 2024. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to the video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to have to start talking about the Daytona Xfinity Series race as they have a new title sponsor for the spring race at Daytona, which is going to be called the United Rentals 300. For the last couple of years, it's been called It's Beef, It's What's for Dinner 300, but they're changing up United Rentals. Interesting sponsorship move. I think United Rentals does sponsor a few other races every single year. It is cool to see United Rentals continue to grow their partnership in NASCAR. Nonetheless, pretty awesome to see United Rentals continuing to grow their presence in NASCAR. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jarrett. As it was announced on Tuesday morning that Jarrett will sponsor Justin Allgaier for at least 6 races in 2024. Jarrett has sponsored Josh Berry in the 2022 season for I think 6 or 7 races, or 23 seasons I'd say, for about 6 or 7 years, and also I think they sponsored last year as well. But it's cool to see Jarrett sticking around with Junior Motorsports. Have some talk maybe Jarrett could move to work with Josh Berry at SHR next year, but it is pretty cool to see that Jarrett is going to be staying around and sponsoring Justin Allgaier in the 2024 season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Richmond Raceway, as they have a new logo and a new rebrand as well. This is nothing new. A lot of racetracks have been trying to change their logos. It's something that SMI's kind of done universally with their logos, and they're kind of starting to do that with a lot of their tracks. I think Homestead recently changed their logo not too long ago, and now Richmond has changed their logo. I think it looks very interesting. I think it looks kind of creative and really cool. Nonetheless, I think it actually looks kind of interesting, and I do like it overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about body armor. Now, Adam Stern put out a tweet that regarded the body armor CEO, Tom Gargiulo, congratulating Ryan Blaney on the championship. And Tom Gargiulo says, "We couldn't be happier for Ryan, his entire team and family in Team Penske. When we first partnered with Blaney in 2017, we always knew he had the makings of the NASCAR champion. Body Armor's been a partner of Ryan Blaney since 2018 or 2019 when they partnered up with him. So it is very cool to see them congratulate him. Of course, one of the biggest sports drink companies out there at the moment. I think it's really awesome, really cool to see them going out congratulating Ryan Blaney and win the championship. And it's really cool to see a sponsor committed to a race car driver like Ryan Blaney. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kevin Harvick. As there was reported by Adam Stern and multiple different reporters that Kevin Harvick has bought Ricky Bobby's North Carolina mansion that was used in Talladega Nights for $6.75 million. Let's just hope that Ryan Preece and the other driver, Chase Briscoe, get to go there and do some skits over there. But really cool to see Kevin Harvick buy the Ricky Bobby house in all seriousness. Interesting that he bought it for $6.75 million, probably moving his family around, all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of money for sure, but it's very awesome and interesting and cool to see him buy that house. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Julia Landauer. As she announced yesterday, she has started working at NASCAR on their strategy and innovation team. For those who do not know who Julia Landauer is, she actually used to compete in NASCAR's Euro Series and also I think competed in the ARCA West and ARCA East Series as well. Now she's found a new calling and she's going to be working inside of NASCAR's team. I think this is a really awesome opportunity for her. I'm really glad that she is getting an opportunity, and congratulations to her on getting to find something else to do in her career, finding a new calling in life, and pretty cool to see that she still gets to work in NASCAR as someone who's an employee of the sport. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Winston Cup Museum. As it was unfortunately announced, I believe on Wednesday, the Winston Cup Museum will be closing on December 16th, 2023. This has been a story that unfortunately none of us were wanting to hear, sadly, about the Winston Cup Museum because there's a lot of history around the Winston Cup Museum. It basically had been brought back, I think, just recently in recent months, if I'm not mistaken. And now, due to, I think, some sort of lawsuits and legal issues, something along those lines, this museum is sadly shutting down. This is really disappointing and sad to hear that this no longer is going to be around, but it's sadly not a shock or surprise. But I wish it was still around, but sadly, it is no longer going to be around anymore after December 16th. They're going to be auctioning it off, I think, after that, and become auctions. A lot of that's going to be going there. So if you're wanting to get some stuff from there, you'll have an opportunity to get that if you go to Mecum. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Lewis Hamilton. As it was reported by Adam Stern, I believe 2 days ago, that Fortnite is adding Lewis Hamilton as a playable character as part of its Icon series. This is, I believe, the first time that someone in the motorsports world has been added as a character in Fortnite. Obviously, with it being the Las Vegas Grand Prix, we'll talk about here in just a little bit with the disaster we've been seeing so far. It is really cool to see Fortnite is acknowledging, I think, how big, Fortnite, as I should say, is acknowledging how kind of big this weekend really is, and is probably acknowledging it there and bringing Lewis Hamilton in there. A lot of people probably know who Lewis Hamilton is, even outside of the Formula One world, and I think this is going to be a really good opportunity and really good shot to see how much successful this can be for the event in general. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Williams. As it's just been announced a few minutes ago that Josh Williams will be running a late model at Florence Speedway with Kaulig Racing. It was confirmed yesterday that Josh Williams will be joining Kaulig Racing full-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024. So this is a really cool opportunity to see that he will be driving at Florence Speedway. I think Dale Jr. is also going to be in that race as well, which I think that's really cool with the South Carolina 400. I think that is tomorrow. But nonetheless, I think it's a really cool opportunity for Josh Williams, and I think he'll be pretty competitive. He did have some success in late model racing in the past, so pretty awesome to see he'll be competing in a late model at Florence Speedway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about IndyCar at Iowa. As they announced yesterday afternoon that the IndyCar Iowa Saturday night race is going to be at night in 2024. For the last couple of years, the Saturday race has been on the day. I think 2021 and 2022 were day races, but in 23, I should say, were day races. But now 2024, for the first time in a few years, is going to be at night. This makes a ton of sense. It does get really hot in Iowa in June/July, and it makes a ton more sense to have it as a night race. I think the aesthetic is more pleasing anyways, and it used to be a night race anyways, and I think it was a more successful event in general. So I think this is a fantastic decision for IndyCar to make this move. I'm really happy that they've done this. I think this is the right call, the right decision, and nonetheless really happy and glad to see that they made the right call here and have gone ahead and done this. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Newman. As it was announced, I believe, on Wednesday, that the appeals panel has upheld a $10,000 fine to Ryan Newman for not wearing a head sock during practice/qualifying at Homestead Miami Speedway. For those of you who don't know, as I just mentioned a second ago, Ryan Newman had gotten penalized for safety issues. And of course, Rick, where I think it was NBM Motorsports, have gone to appeal that penalty. But of course, because Ryan Newman did drive the 6.6 car for NBM Motorsports at Homestead Miami Speedway, but they have made the decision, and I think this is absolutely the right call. Health and safety is the number one priority of drivers, and you do have to make sure your sport is extremely safe. And you can't have issues like this creeping up, because in my opinion, it's just not acceptable. So good to see that they've upheld these penalties. I think it's good they've done this. I know that Brian Newman and NBM are probably not going to be happy because they're not worth a ton of money as an organization. But still, I think it's disappointing for them. They have made some big moves this year, and some big movements, some growth as an organization and team. But nonetheless, it's not a major surprise and shock that they have gotten in trouble for this. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Marcus Ericsson and Jenson Button. As it was announced on Tuesday morning that Marcus Ericsson and Jenson Button are going to be driving for Wayne Taylor's Racing/Andretti in 2024 in the Rolex 24. I believe Marcus Ericsson is going to be in the 40 car and Jenson Button will be in the 10 car. This is really cool to see. Not as a major surprise to see that Marcus Ericsson is going to be competing with this team, considering he's going to be driving for Andretti in IndyCar in 2024. Not a big surprise there, but Marcus Ericsson has competed in the Rolex 24 before. I believe he competed in 2022 and 2023 with Chip Ganassi Racing. While he was not able to win the event, he was pretty quick in the car that he was able to drive. And as for Jenson Button, it's a fantastic opportunity for him. He's going to be part of an organization that easily could win the Rolex 24. They've won the race, I think, back in 2019. They won the race in 2017 with Jeff Gordon. And now they've got a legendary Formula One driver coming in and racing with them as well. And also a really good IndyCar driver as well, who could be a championship threat this year in that number 28 car in 2024. This is a really good opportunity for both those drivers. And again, really exciting and awesome stuff. And glad to see that both those drivers are going to be doing this in 2024. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Nashville Fairgrounds. Now, we have talked a lot about the Nashville Fairgrounds on this channel over the course of the last 2 to 3 years. But I believe it was last night that Adam Stern put out a tweet in regards to some renderings in regards to the Nashville Fairgrounds that you're seeing on your screen. And he says there's some renderings of what a renovated Nashville Fairgrounds could look like. Not the track itself or everything kind of around the racetrack. And I have to say, for some of these images that have surfaced, I think it does look very, very interesting in regards to Nashville Fairgrounds. There still has not been approval in regards to bringing racing back there. They want basically a 30-year approval so you have racing there where NASCAR Cup Series race every other year. But like I've already mentioned and said, they still has to be approved by multiple different entities, and it's got to go up to the higher ups. We know there's a new mayor team that is going to be coming into play, but trust me, I think the new group that's going to be coming in to the mayor's office is probably still going to be wanting this event to go into play. Obviously, there's been a lot of backlash by the local community from Nashville that is against this race coming back, but they've already said that they'll probably have mufflers coming in if they do come back to the Nashville Fairgrounds. I want to see this event succeed. I think it'd be really huge for NASCAR. It would be inside the city. You have a racetrack inside the city. And overall, I really hope this event does succeed and is able to come back in the future. We'll have to wait and see if it does get approved, but it's really some awesome and cool looks, and we'll see what happens in regards to the renovations. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Harmon Racing. This story kind of went under the radar yesterday with some of the other big news that came out. But there's a tweet that came out, I think, from small budget teams, Joseph Strigley, and also Harmon Racing announced on Facebook that they are returning in 2024. And CHK Racing is no longer a thing anymore. Due to a situation with Gary Keller and certain promises that were made to the organization, help them upgrade their team and organization, they are going to be back to Harmon Racing, and Harmon is not very happy about that. I believe Gary Keller has also been involved with JD Motorsports in the past. I think Gary was a major reason why, sadly, JD Motorsports kind of was in a downward spiral for a very, very long time, and they haven't really showed the same competitive speed since Ross Chastain was behind the wheel, and I think Gary Keller had a big part in that. It is disappointing to hear that they no longer are going to be a thing CHK Racing, but of course Gary Keller was a big part of that. And again, you got to basically pay them and try to help the organization. You made some big promises, and you didn't deliver on those promises. So nonetheless, interesting to see, and again, a little bit of some beef going on between Gary Keller and Harmon. But I'm glad to see that Harmon Racing's back, and hopefully they're going to be more competitive this time around. Hopefully they do end up being a lot more competitive. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jimmy Villeneuve. As it was reported, I believe, by Bob Pockrass on Tuesday or Wednesday that Jimmy Villeneuve will become the crew chief for Stuart Friesen in 2024. Jimmy Villeneuve, for those who do not know, had been the crew chief for Chase Purdy in 2023. And while Chase Purdy did not win this year in 2023, he did have a career year in the Truck Series, had an outside shot of making the playoffs, and could have honestly won the most recent race at Phoenix Raceway. We'll talk about Chase Purdy here in just a little bit. But it's an interesting move for Jimmy Villeneuve because I believe Harmon Friesen is going to be a Toyota team once again in 2024. And Jimmy Villeneuve does have a lot of experience, I think, being a car chief, an engineer, and I also think has a little bit of experience being a crew chief before being a crew chief for Chase Purdy in 2023. I'm very intrigued to see how Jimmy is going to end up doing in 2024. I want him to succeed, do a good job as a crew chief, help Stuart Friesen out. Stuart did have some struggles this year. They had multiple crew chief changes. They had Blake Barnell come in crew chief for a few races. They had a bunch of other guys. They had Trip Bruce, I think, among other guys that have worked with them in the past, that have worked as crew chiefs with him, that kind of struggled. So we'll see how Stuart Friesen does in 2024. There were some struggles this past year. Hopefully there can be some improvement and some work done to try to help the organization in 2024. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Now, usually I don't talk about Formula One race weekends until the race weekend has completed. Usually I talk about it on the Mondays after. But I need to talk about the Las Vegas Grand Prix so far up to this point because, let's be honest, what we've seen so far, it has been a pretty big disaster. Obviously, we've had a lot of driver criticism from people like Max Verstappen, who've been extremely critical of the Las Vegas Grand Prix up to this point, basically calling it a show and not basically a sporting event. But then last night, they had the first practice session, which, by the way, was, I believe, at 8 p.m. local time. And they didn't even get 10 minutes into practice before they had to call off practice because a manhole cover, or a drain cover as we call it in the United States, basically broke, and he ran over that cover. Now, this is not the first time we have seen this before. We've seen this back in 2019 at Baku. Can't remember exactly who's the one who ran over that drain cover in Baku. But here's the issue. It wasn't just one drain cover that came into play. It was multiple drain covers across the racetrack. Now, apparently the track had been in a lot of rush, and it seemed like that their inspection that F1 had done, apparently the inspection had gotten approved, but for some reason it shouldn't have gotten approved because there were more issues that creeped up over time. And then, like I said, with the manhole cover, and he had a bunch of cars damaged. Carlos Sainz's race practice ended early, but luckily for him, he was able to get out in practice 2. Speaking of practice 2, they basically had to do practice 2, and they kicked everybody out because they started at such a late time. Again, this is a major, major issue I have with Formula 1, and they did release a statement in regards to the situation, and they didn't even really give an apology, and it sounds like there's going to be no refunds coming into play. What has happened in the first day of this event, it has been a disaster. Now, do not get me wrong, I want this event to succeed as much as the next person. It would be really, really huge for the Vegas area, but you have a lot of people in Las Vegas who in general are against this event, who did not want this event to come to Las Vegas in the first place. And there's just been a lot of frustration from local people and a lot of people in the F1 world as well. And yet people spend thousands of dollars to go to this race, only for F1 to kick them out to not see a second practice session. They have been, again, it's just ridiculous everything that's kind of happened with this event, and I really hope to turn it around today and tomorrow as well. I'm a little worried, at least they got the second practice done. They got to be perfect. They got to have a really good race to make up for it, because so far what we've seen is just not been acceptable and uncalled for to everything that's happened up this point. Hopefully things can turn around, it can get better, but honestly, I'm a little worried about this, and I think that it might end up getting worse before it actually does end up getting better, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chris Wright. As it was announced on Wednesday evening that Chris Wright will be joining Venturini Motorsports full-time in 2024, driving the number 15 car. Chris Wright did compete in the Truck Series for quite a few races in the 2023 season, and also competed with other organizations in the Xfinity Series. Actually drove for Brandon Brown's organization in 2022, but has also ran part-time in ARCA. Now, Chris Wright obviously has competed and do some racing in basically IMSA, among other forms of racing, and has transitioned NASCAR over the course of the last few years. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys, Chris Wright should have an easy time because, number one, the competition in ARCA next year is not going to be very, very high. I think I think a couple people like Taylor Reimer is going to be part of that series next year. You're going to have a couple other people that are coming into play. Tony Breitinger could return to ARCA in 2024. There have been some rumors that should be going to Tricon. But going back and talking about Chris Wright, I need to see some improvement from Chris Wright in 2024. He needs to be contending for wins. You're in a car that's capable of winning. You're in the best car in the field. You should be up front contending for victories on a consistent basis. I'm worried, though, that he's not going to do that, and I think he's going to somewhat struggle. That's a big worry I have in regards to Chris Wright. It is a good opportunity for him, though, and we'll see how he ends up doing with Venturini Motorsports in the 2024 season. Hope he can have a pretty good year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about IndyCar. Now, this is something has been expected for quite a while, but it was announced, I believe, on Wednesday. Mike Straw reported on this one, and Adam Stern quoted this as well. The IndyCar has terminated its agreement with Motorsports Games. Now, the interesting thing when it comes to IndyCar and Motorsports Games, they had two agreements set. One, they had to produce a game, which obviously they did not produce a game, and they have shelved and laid everybody off from the Australian studio who was making the IndyCar game. But number two, they basically had to have esport events and basically like things like the Indy 500 that iRacing had, and of course they did not live up to those promises as well. We've obviously talked about Motorsports Games on this channel a lot, and it sounds like we're near the end of the Motorsports Games saga, or basically the disastrous Motorsports Games saga that has been going around. Would not be surprised or shocked if we see a documentary that does end up coming out from how bad this company has been run, false promises made, among other things, and now I think this company is going to be done by the end of the year, and honestly, I could not be happier. I feel bad for a lot of people who worked at Motorsports Games, though, because it's not their fault. The higher-ups of the company were just really shady and really scammy and really did a lot of bad things in general and ruined the reputation with a very quick swivel. It's just really disappointing to see everything that's kind of went down in regards to the situation, but it's not a major shock to see. It is disappointing, though. I feel for the people that are working on the game. It's really frustrating, and I feel for all the people working on this game, but I'm not surprised that it turned into a disaster. This whole thing has just been a mess in general, and it doesn't surprise or shock me at this point that this has turned into a major shambolic, and I think this is really ridiculous how it kind of went down, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Anthony Alfredo. Now, we're going to talk about Live Fast Motorsports here in just a little bit. But Anthony Alfredo did confirm this a couple days ago, and Live Fast Motorsports confirmed this, owner BJ McLeod confirmed this as well, that Anthony Alfredo will not be returning to BJ McLeod Motorsports in 2024. Anthony Alfredo had joined BJ McLeod Motorsports for 2023, and honestly, he had some decent success. I think he got a couple top 10s, and at one point was in the top 15 and top 20 standings for a majority of this year. Anthony Alfredo does have talent, but unfortunately, Anthony Alfredo did have a lot of DNS throughout the 2023 season. Now, I will admit those are not everything really was Anthony Alfredo's fault. There were a lot of struggles that were not on him. A lot of things Rex got caught up on, a lot of frustration from him. And I think this team did show a lot of improvement at times throughout the year, but there were a lot of struggles for him. Now, the big question is, what will happen to BJ McLeod Motorsports Xfinity team? I think BJ did say they may run it full-time, but they also could run it part-time in 2024. Honestly, this could be a landing spot for multiple different drivers. Someone like a Matt DiBenedetto, perhaps, I could see end up landing here, as crazy as it sounds. I could see another driver like a Josh Bilicki landing here in 2024. I think it'd be very interesting to see someone like that get an opportunity shot with BJ McLeod. As for what happens with Anthony, I don't know where Anthony Alfredo is going to go next year. He could go back to our Motorsports and drive a 02 car. That is a possibility. I don't know what that team's going to be doing for 2024. SS Greenlight, there's a couple cars I think available with SS Greenlight for 2024. He could go to JD Motorsports as well. Other than that, he may have to look at the truck series and going down there. At this point, I think his future is very uncertain, but he said he does have an opportunity to share for 2024, so maybe he does have a good ride that we're not knowing at this point, but honestly, I'm not sure where he's going to end up going in 2024, but Anthony does have talent. The guy's been a contender for wins. He can do it if he gets good opportunity shot. We'll see how he ends up doing, though, in 2024, but nonetheless, it's disappointing to hear that he will not be returning to BJ McLeod Motorsports in 2024. I think he's a good driver, and it'd be cool to see him get an opportunity, but honestly, I think that chances are going to become very slim, unfortunately. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Denny Hamlin. Now, Denny Hamlin put on his story yesterday that he has been speaking to Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes paddock. Now, there have been multiple NASCAR drivers who are at the Las Vegas Grand Prix weekend. Joey Logano was spotted with Ferrari, obviously with the Shell Pennzoil branding that he has. That's one of the reasons why he was in the Ferrari paddock. But you had Denny Hamlin, who was also spotted with Lewis Hamilton. Now, there's been some speculation from a lot of people that maybe Denny Hamlin was speaking to Lewis Hamilton about potentially running a NASCAR Cup Series race, maybe the Daytona 500 as well. 2311 Racing does have a third car that is available currently at the moment for 2024, especially Daytona 500. We have seen this car actually run this year a couple times. Travis Strada made his NASCAR Cup Series debut, and Kamui Kobayashi also drove in this car. And Lewis Hamilton would fit perfectly with the opportunity. Now, Lewis Hamilton, of course, would have to get approved to run it, but I think Lewis Hamilton would end up getting approved. And Lewis Hamilton has shown some interest as well. And Bubba Wallace also said a few months ago, I think before the playoffs had started, that the driver he'd like to see drive that number 67 car would be Lewis Hamilton. And I think it'd be really awesome if Lewis Hamilton did, in fact, ever got the shot and opportunity to run the Daytona 500, because that would probably be the only chance he would get to run a NASCAR Cup Series car, considering the fact that basically the F1 schedule is getting longer and longer, it seems like, every single year, and there's not going to be a lot of opportunities to run outside of that. Now, do I think it happens? I think it's really tough to tell. Speaking of that car, we'll talk about Daytona 500 in just a little bit, but speaking of the 67 car, I could see a lot of other drivers getting a shot and opportunity. I could maybe even see Carl Levers getting a one-off start with the team maybe in the future. We could see drivers like Sheldon Creed and Chandler Smith drive this car for sure, considering the fact that both of them are going to be going to Joe Gibbs Racing. It just has not been officially announced at this point. I think both those drivers have a really good shot and opportunity to drive for this team next year as well. But if we've done this, go back to Lewis Hamilton, it'd be really awesome and cool to see Lewis Hamilton have a shot and opportunity to drive with this team, at least on a one-off start for the Daytona 500. Will it happen? I don't know at this point, but it'd be really cool and awesome to see him have a shot to run with this team in 2024. Will it happen? Time will tell, but hopefully he does get a shot and opportunity to run with this team in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Weatherman. As it was announced on Tuesday morning that Kyle Weatherman will be joining DJM Racing full-time in 2024, driving the number 91 car. Kyle Weatherman is a young driver who's been in the NASCAR Xfinity Series for the last years, really since around the 2019 and 2020 season, and has driven for some smaller organizations like JD Motorsports and also, of course, DGM Racing. When I think of Kyle Weatherman, I think of someone who is extremely talented and extremely underrated. He always gets the best out of equipment, and I've seen him punch over his weight many, many times before. He's been contending for top 10s and top 15s with organizations like JD Motorsports, a team that generally has struggled over the course of the last few seasons, and also has done really good with DGM Racing as well. Now, what are my expectations for Kyle Weatherman going into 2024? I have some pretty decently high expectations for Kyle Weatherman. I think he's going to be contending for top 15 in the points in 2024. And I think he's going to get a couple occasional top 10s throughout the year because DGM Racing, I think with Kyle Weatherman coming in full-time, I think he is going to have a very, very good year. And I'm excited for this for Kyle Weatherman. I've been a big fan of Kyle Weatherman's for the last 2 years. We obviously know that Kyle Weatherman has been doing some simulator work with Hendrick Motorsports over the course of the last few years. He's been doing some sim work with the next-gen car, so it'd be cool to see him one time, maybe an opportunity with the next-gen. But a lot of people have been taking notice on how good of a driver Kyle Weatherman truly is, and I think this is a fantastic and great opportunity for Kyle. And I think he, like I said, he will make the most out of it going into 2024. This is a great opportunity. I think this is fantastic for him. I'm looking forward to this. This is amazing for him, and I think he will be very, very successful in this upcoming season. Again, great opportunity for him. Looking forward to it. He absolutely deserves it. He deserves a shot and opportunity to be in a really good car, and I cannot wait to see Kyle Weatherman driving full-time with DGM Racing in 2024. Like I said, I think he's absolutely going to make the best out of it. I think he's going to have a really solid and great season. I think he will absolutely be a threat and a major contender in 2024 for some good years, and I think it's going to be really awesome to see him drive full-time with DGM Racing in the 2024 season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Live Fast Motorsports. I already talked about this Anthony Alfredo, but we had a press conference, I believe it was on Tuesday or Wednesday, with Live Fast Motorsports. And there were some things that were confirmed in regards to Live Fast Motorsports. Now, the number that Live Fast Motorsports has been using, they are going to be using that number, the number 78 car, once again in 2024. And they'll be running an open car in 2024. They are going to run all the super speedway races, so all 6 super speedway races, both Atlanta races, both Daytona races, and both Talladega races are going to be run by Live Fast Motorsports, and they potentially could run some road course races in 2024 as well. When I think about that, I think of someone like Josh Blicky, who's driven for Live Fast Motorsports before, him getting a shot and opportunity to drive with this team. But then the other thing that was confirmed, and this kind of surprised me, Matt Tifft is no longer an owner of Live Fast Motorsports. A big reason why Matt Tifft is no longer an owner, it's not bad reasons. The reason being is because Matt Tifft has a new opportunity. For the first time since 2019, he has been approved to go back and race late models for the first time in a few years. He had a late model test last year or earlier this year, and basically has been approved to go do some late model racing. So it's really good to see that Matt Tifft is getting back behind the wheel, and cool to see him getting an opportunity shot to race once again. Hope he can be very successful in late models. As for Live Fast Motorsports, it is still good to see that they are going to be around next year. There have been some worries that Live Fast Motorsports is no longer going to be around in NASCAR in 2024 when they sold off their charter. Obviously, they have sold that charter to Spire Motorsports, who we'll also be talking about near the end of this episode. But I think this is a fantastic opportunity for them to go and race super speedways. I know BJ would like to have some better equipment in 2024, and maybe he'll get some better equipment with a team like Richard Childress Racing, maybe in Daytona 500 as well. But again, I think this is fantastic to see that they are going to be continuing their organization into the 2024 season. BJ is one of the best underdogs in the garage. A lot of people have a ton of respect for BJ McLeod, and a lot of drivers who are racing in NASCAR today have gotten opportunities with BJ McLeod. So I think while it sucks to see that Fast Motorsports is no longer a full-time team in the Cup Series, it's understandable why they at least are going to be, they sold off, they weren't getting their competitiveness. He kind of mentioned that in the press conference as well on Tuesday, that they weren't as competitive as they truly wanted to be, and they did want to end up being a little bit better. Unfortunately, they never really were able to be a better organization, which was disappointing in general. So nonetheless, disappointing to hear that they're not going to be full-time this year. At least we know they're going to be around, which at least is better than anything at this point. But nonetheless, it is at least good to see that they are going to be sticking around next year in 2024, at least on a part-time basis. Glad to see, though, they will be around in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daytona 500 open cars. Now, there's someone that asked a question in regards to potential possibility of what open cars could show up at the Daytona 500. Well, Bob Pockers did respond to this question, as I think after the Fast Motorsports stuff had kind of gotten reported. They asked this question in regards to that, and some of the teams that he mentioned that did run some teams last year, like Beer Motorsports, is going to potentially show up. The Money Team, which they kind of confirmed recently that they're still around. Teams like Legacy, Kaulig, Front Row 2311, and NY Racing were teams that Bob Pockers had mentioned as potential organizations who could show up with a third car in 2024 for the Daytona 500. We also obviously know that he's also kind of noted there potentially will be more entries that are going to run in 2024 than the previous year. I think there were 42 cars that did enter the Daytona 500 in 2023. We could see 43 to 44 cars in 2024. Just looking at teams that I could see showing up, obviously I do expect that Beer Motorsports is going to show up in 2024 for the Daytona 500. Would not surprise me if we see Austin Hill drive that car, though we could see RCR open up a third car, which is another thing to think about. I could see RCR open up in a third car and having Austin Hill drive that. Then you think about other organizations like the Money Team. There have been some rumors that the Money Team was going to close their organization, but at least we know the Money Team is going to be around in 2024, at least on a part-time basis. I could see someone like a Matt DiBenedetto going there on a part-time basis to run with that team, or like a Helio Castroneves driving with that organization as well. And think about some of the other organizations like NY Racing. I think that team's a little bit in jeopardy. I don't think that team's ever going to be showing up anymore, to be honest. So I'm not sure if they're going to be around. But if they do, maybe somehow get Gray Biffle and call him back out and have him come back and race. And think about other organizations. Legacy is going to run a third car for Jimmy Johnson. We know that Jimmy is going to be running once again in 2024, at least on a part-time basis, around 10 to 12 races this upcoming season. So I expect him to run the Daytona 500. Front Rows ran a third car all the Super Speedway races, so I would expect that they're going to show up next year. 2311 Racing, I already talked about this with Lewis Hamilton, potentially maybe coming over and run, or someone else like a Travis Strana again could come in, or someone else like a Carl Edwards could come in and run the Daytona 500. And then you think about other teams who could open up a third car like Richard Childress Racing. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what comes out with the Daytona 500 as we do get closer to the 2024 Daytona 500, because we are about 93 days from the Daytona 500 2024. As we get closer to the end of 2023 and get it started 2024, I believe that speculation is going to grow in major ways. So we'll see how things get handled in regards to that when it does come to Daytona 500 entries. And I'm excited to see how things do end up unfolding for 2024 for the 500. I hope we get like 44, 45 entries, which would make Daytona 500 a lot more interesting and see what drivers do show up. I also will mention another team, Kaulig Racing. I could see them show up for the Daytona 500 as well with Josh Williams or AJ Allmendinger, who we'll be talking about here in just a little bit. But nonetheless, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how things kind of get handled, and we'll see how things do kind of shake down when it regards and when it comes down to the 2024 Daytona 500. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kaulig Racing. Now, we did have a big Kaulig story that came out yesterday we'll talk about here near the end of this episode. But there was someone that asked a question in regards to what the rest of Kaulig Racing's plans are going to be for 2024. And Bob Pockers did respond. There were some interesting things that kind of came out from this. First, Ty Dillon has apparently had conversations with Kaulig Racing for 2024. Obviously, we know that Ty Dillon is a current favorite to take over the 16 car in the NASCAR Cup Series for 2024. Ty Dillon brings sponsorship funding from Ferris Motors, which has sponsored Ty Dillon the last couple of years. They sponsored him when he drove for Petty GMS before they rebranded to Legacy Motor Club. And of course, in 2023, he brought them over to Spire Motorsports. And I believe they also sponsored him and ran a couple select Xfinity Series races in 2023 2023 in the number 3 car. Ty Dillon is the current favorite, as much as I really don't want Ty Dillon to be driving the 3 car next year in the number 16 car, I should say. Ty Dillon does have funding in sponsorship. That's a pretty big reason why he's likely going to be taking over that car in 2024. Bob also knows that A.J. Allmendinger is more than likely to return the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024. He does know that A.J. has said that he will more than likely do what Kaulig Racing wants them to do headed into 2024, but more than likely A.J. Allmendinger likely to be driving the 16 Xfinity car in 2024. There was another interesting thing that he noted is that Shane Van Gisbergen could go to Kaulig Racing on that part-time deal in 2024. Now, when we talk about Shane Van Gisbergen here, SVG has not announced his schedule at this point for 2024. We know he's going to have a development deal with Trackhouse Racing. Reason I mentioned Kaulig Racing here and why Bob also mentions Kaulig Racing is because Trackhouse and Kaulig Racing do have a technical partnership. Kaulig Racing does get their pit crews from Trackhouse Racing, and a couple of the Trackhouse drivers and even the owner of the team, Justin Marks, has driven for Kaulig Racing. Ross Chastain has driven for the team and won with them in the past, and also Daniel Suarez drove for them earlier this year at Pocono as well. They didn't really have a lot of success with the organization and team, but still he drove for them. So SVG could drive for this team, especially on the road courses. Now, if Shane Van Gisbergen does go to Kaulig Racing, I could also see him running the ovals as well. This could be where he gets his oval experience, more than likely in that number 10 car. Now, in regards to other drivers, I could see driving a 10 car in 2024. Maybe Zane Smith goes here on a part-time basis. I think Kaulig and Spire have had a past relationship before working together, so I could see him going here. I also could see Kyle Busch running here once again in 2024 on a select number of races, and also Kyle Larson as well, who drove in a one-off at Darlington Raceway with this team and organization. And I also do expect some other Chevy drivers to come into play, like an Austin Dillon perhaps, come in to drive for this team. Nonetheless, I think it's very interesting to see how things kind of flow and how things kind of get handled when it does come to Kaulig Racing for 2024. We'll see how the rest of the things end up flying, though, for 2024 in regards to Kaulig Racing. And now we're going ahead to on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Spire Motorsports. Now, on Wednesday, Bob Poggers put out a tweet in regards to a lot of things regarding Spire Motorsports. The first thing that Bob notes is that Zane Smith's number for 2024 is going to be the number 71. This is a very interesting move, meaning that the driver lineup is set for Spire Motorsports headed into 2024. Corey LaJoie being the number 7 car, Carson riding 77, and the 71 car returns for the first time since, I believe, 2019 or 2020 when Ryan Truex drove the 71 car for Tommy Baldwin Racing. It is really cool to see that the number 71 is returning, and Zane Smith did confirm that in a tweet, I believe yesterday, with the number 71, confirming that he will also be in that 71 car in 2024. It's a very interesting number, and in regards to Zane Smith as well, he will have a Trackhouse crew chief. Remember, that 71 car is going to have Trackhouse affiliation. Spire is going to be building those cars, but he'll have Trackhouse engineers working with him to help him as well, which means that maybe someone like a Darian Grubb could be the crew chief for that 71 car next year in 2024. But there were a couple other things that got noted by Bob as well. First, he confirms that Nick Sanchez and Chase Purdy will be driving the 2 Spire trucks full-time in 2024. Nick Sanchez will be driving the number 2 truck for Spire Motorsports as Rev Racing more than likely gets absorbed into Spire Motorsports. Let's first talk about Nick Sanchez. Nick Sanchez had an amazing year in the Truck Series in 2023. While he did not end up winning a race in the 2023 season, he did make it to the round of 8 and had an outside shot of making the Championship 4 and only missed out on the Championship 4 by 1 point and had basically, he got one more position up. I think maybe he would have gotten the tiebreaker, but I'm not entirely sure. But Nick Sanchez did have a very solid year and also won a lot of poles as well. I think the goal for Nick Sanchez going into the 2024 season is to go out there and obviously win some races in 2024 and contend for the championship. And luckily for him, Spire Motorsports is a pretty good truck series program, so I expect him to be very, very good next year. Moving on to Chase Purdy, however, Chase Purdy is also going to be a Spire full-time in 2024. My best guess is the number that he's going to drive is a number 77. We actually saw that second Spire truck, the number 77 truck, debut with Derek Kraus behind the wheel. So I would expect that Chase Purdy will be in the number 77. But Chase Purdy, I'll talk about him for a second. He did have a decent year with Spire Motors, not with Spire, but KBM this year. I already talked about it with Jimmy Villeneuve being his crew chief. He did have some solid success, and I think Chase Purdy needs to be contending. I don't expect him to run as good as Nick Sanchez did in 2024. Or 23, I should say, but I think they'll have a decent year and run competitively heading into 2024. As in regards to the third Spire truck, it will be a full-time truck, but it will have multiple different drivers behind the wheel. Drivers that I can see drive for the team. Obviously, Kyle Busch, he's going to drive with the organization. He's going to be working as a consulting driver with the team and organization next year in 2024. So I would expect that Kyle Busch is going to be behind the wheel of that truck as well. I also do expect a guy like Kyle Larson to come out there and race a few times. Kyle Larson did run in North Wilkesboro in 2023. Got a win. William Byron is probably going to drive with this team as well. I also would expect that Carson Hocevar and potentially Zane Smith could end up driving with this team. And I think this could be also a place for Shane Van Gisbergen in 2024 as well, considering the number of rides that are tries available for SVG are starting to close up in the truck series. There's been some time maybe go to Nice Motorsports, but the truck that I originally thought he'd go to, which was Nice Motorsports, the number 41 truck, is no longer available as Bailey Curry is going to be full-time with the team in 2024, unless, of course, they would end up using the 44 truck. But now with the Trackhouse/Spire partnership is going on, I would imagine SVG will go here. Nonetheless, a lot of movement going on when it does come to Spire Motorsports. I think it's interesting what has been happening there. We'll see how things end up playing out when it does come to Spire Motorsports in 2024 and see how they end up performing heading into the 2024 NASCAR season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Jake Garcia. Now, this has been rumored over the course of the last week, and Private Porno had put this out as a tweet, but it was officially confirmed, I believe, on Wednesday afternoon that Jake Garcia will be, in fact, joining ThorSport Racing on a full-time basis in 2024, replacing Hailie Deegan headed into the 2024 season. We obviously know Hailie Deegan is no longer going to be in the Truck Series in 2024, as she'll be moving up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series to drive for AIM Racing on a full-time basis in 2024. While the number has not been officially confirmed for Jake Garcia headed into the 2024 season, I would imagine he'll be driving the 13 truck, or maybe he does drive the 66, but more than likely be driving the 13 truck in 2024. Jake Garcia had a pretty solid year, actually, with BMR. Christian Eckes obviously outperformed, but Christian Eckes has a lot more experience. Christian got 4 wins in the 2023 season. And while, like I said, Jake Garcia did not score a victory in the Truck Series in 2023, Jake, like I said, put up some pretty respectable and some pretty solid numbers in 2024. And I believe Jake Garcia is going to be a pretty big contender to get his first career win, which I think he will win a race this upcoming season compared to Hailie Deegan. We'll talk about her in a second. But when it comes to Jake Garcia, he is a better driver than Hailie Deegan. I'm just going to be real on it. He did way better than her. And I think, like I said, this is a fantastic opportunity when it comes to Jake Garcia, which translates back to Hailie Deegan for a second, because while I do like Hailie Deegan a lot, I mentioned this with Jake Garcia, he is a better driver. But again, I think Jake Garcia, like I said, he's a better driver than Hailie Deegan. There's no ifs and buts about it. He did better than her this year. You know, he's in potentially better equipment than her, but ThorSport is a top-tier team. So he's going to probably be a contender for wins. As we look at the rest of the ThorSport lineup going into 2024, I really don't expect many changes with the rest of the ThorSport lineup. I would imagine that Ben Rhodes, who's coming off of winning his second championship from a few weeks ago, one of the biggest disasters in Truck Series history, he more than likely back in the 99 truck next year in 2024. I would expect Matt Crafton's going to be back behind the wheel of the 88 truck next year. I don't know how much longer Matt Crafton is going to be around in the Truck Series. He's probably getting closer to the end of his career, though. He could be around for the next 10 years for all we know, but I don't know how much longer he'll be with ThorSport Racing. And then Ty Majeski more than likely will be driving with ThorSport once again in the 98 truck. But at this point, Ty Majeski, he should have an opportunity to run an Xfinity. I don't know why an Xfinity team. I know he ran Xfinity with Roush and he struggled, but maybe if RFK ever opened up an Xfinity Series team, which there are some talks of that could have happened, maybe he goes there. But honestly, I don't know if he wants to go back there, especially after what happened 5 or 6 years ago. But like I said, going back to Jake Garcia, what are my expectations for Jake Garcia going into the 2024 NASCAR Truck Series season? Well, he needs to do better than Hailie Deegan, which I think is going to be pretty easy going into 2024. I think he will be a playoff contender, and I think that he will have a chance to win races. And I would not be surprised or shocked if he does get his first career NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series victory. Because ThorSport Racing, they are one of the best teams in the Truck Series. Like I said, they're coming off of winning their second championship. They had Ben Rosen got the championship there. And he's going to be working with 3 really solid veteran drivers as well that could really help him out. Now, long term, I don't know what this means for Jake Garcia's career because he could be a career driver team, but we have to remember this too. Jake Garcia is only 19 years old. So Jake Garcia has a long time, and there really is no rush to move up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series as well. Plus, when you really think about the rides that are available in Xfinity, a lot of them are closing up really quickly. We talked about JGR, and while it's not been officially announced, we know that Sheldon Creed and Chandler Smith are going to be going over there next year. RSS Racing is pretty much closing up that stuff. Frankie Mead is more than likely going to be headed there in 2024, though nothing's been officially confirmed at this particular point. But again, going back to Jake Garcia, this is a fantastic and great opportunity for him. I think he's going to be a legitimate outside championship threat and contender. I know there's a lot of competition going to 2024, but you don't have to deal with Hailie Deegan, Carson Osabar, and Zane Smith next year. But you're going to have to deal with Christian Eck as your former teammate, and also Corey Hammer. I think are going to be the 2 guys to be in the Truck Series in 2024. Nonetheless, it's a fantastic and great opportunity, and nonetheless glad to see that Jake Garcia will be joining ThorSport Racing in the 2024 season, most likely in the 13 truck. Glad to see him getting a shot and opportunity with this team and organization. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Williams. Now, I made a video talking about this yesterday, but it was finally confirmed after a report that got leaked, I believe, on Tuesday or Wednesday, that Josh Williams will be joining Kaulig Racing in 2024, driving the number 11 car in 2024 with Alloy Employer to sponsor. Now, how did Josh Williams get this opportunity shot? Well, according to a report that came out from Matt Weaver, he had spoken to Josh Williams, and Matt basically reports that Alloy Employer has actually been working with Matt Kaulig on a B2B deal. Meaning this is why Josh Williams is getting the opportunity in shot. For those of you who do not know who Josh Williams is known as the guy who earlier this year parked it on the front stretch at Atlanta Motor Speedway. He got a lot of recognition, and a lot of people really, really liked Josh in that and liked his charisma. Josh Williams, in my opinion, does have one of the best personalities in the sport, and Josh is someone, in my honest opinion, too, who can get the best out of equipment. I've seen what he's been able to do with DGM Racing over the course of the last 2 years. And like I said, he has shown above weight and been pretty competitive at times. I think he got a couple top 10s this year, actually, with DGM. I go back to Kansas earlier this year, where he finished, 8th or 9th in a top 10 speed near the end of the event. I know there were a lot of cars that ended up wrecking out, but still he ended up getting a couple top 10s throughout his career. Now, what are my expectations for Josh Williams going into the 2024 season? Well, I think Josh Williams is going to have a career in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, obviously. But we do have to remember this about Kaulig Racing. They're not as good of an organization as they used to be. They're still a somewhat competitive team, but they've not had the same numbers and wins that they used to have. This year in 2023, they only got, 3 or 4 wins. 1 with Chandler Smith, 2 with AJ Allmendinger, and 1 with Kyle Larson. Allmendinger won Nashville, and then, of course, at Circuit of the Americas. And then, of course, Chandler Smith won Richmond. And then Kyle Larson won at Darlington in the spring. Outside of that, they failed to win with Kyle Busch earlier this year, and other drivers struggled in that team as well throughout the year. So they're not as fast of an organization. That being said, Josh Williams, I think, will be contending for wins and top 10s, and that's his goal. He actually put that in the same article, that his goal is to finish on a top 10 on a week-by-week basis. And Josh Williams, I think, is going to be able to accomplish that this year. I think he's going to be contending for top 10s and even top 5s on a pretty consistent basis headed into the 2024 NASCAR season. I think he'll have a pretty good year, and I think he'll have a really good chance to make the playoffs. But the competition in Xfinity is still going to be really tough for Josh Williams going into next year. You're going to have to deal with Austin Hill, who's coming off of a career year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. You're going to have to deal with Chandler Smith. You're going to have to deal with Sheldon Creed next year. Sammy's just going over to Junior Motorsports next year. You'll have to deal with him next year. You'll have to deal with other drivers next year in 2024. You'll have to deal with AJ Allmendinger, we'll talk about here in just a second, more than likely driving an Xfinity car with this team. You're going to have a lot of drivers to deal with going to 2024, but I think Josh Williams has a really good career ahead of himself, and I think this is a fantastic opportunity for him. I think Josh Williams will have a shot of making the playoffs. I think it's going to be tough for him to make it, but I think he's got a really good opportunity and a really good shot to make the playoffs heading into the 2024 season. This is an amazing opportunity for him, and nonetheless glad to see him getting the shot and opportunity to drive with the team in 2024. As for the rest of Kaulig Racing, what's going to happen to this team going into 2024? Well, I talk about the Xfinity Series, and I kind of talk about this here at the beginning of this round, but Ty Dillon more than likely, of course, is going to 16 car for Kaulig Racing in the Cup Series in 2024, meaning that AJ Allmendinger is more than likely to move back down to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024 with Kaulig Racing. Now, as much as I don't want AJ to stay and go down to Xfinity, and I would rather him stay in the Cup Series considering he won this year at the Charlotte Roval, he doesn't bring as much funding and sponsorship, unfortunately, as a driver like Ty Dillon does. Ty Dillon, I've already mentioned this a little bit ago, but Ty Dillon brings sponsorship funding from Ferris Motors. That is a massive and a huge reason why Ty Dillon's more likely going to this car in the first place. But that being said, I'd rather see AJ Allmendinger behind the wheel of this car than Ty Dillon. But again, it all comes down to sponsorship funding, unfortunately, and you've got to have that stuff if you are going to compete in the series. It's just the name of the game, unfortunately. You have to have sponsorship funding if you are going to compete in this sport. Going back, though, to Josh Williams, talking about him, this is a great opportunity. I love drivers like him who don't always win the most sponsorship funding, but they get the opportunities in shots, and the people take chances on them. And I do believe this upcoming season that he's going to live up to the hype, and he's going to live up to the opportunity. I think it's going to be a pretty good year for him. He's going to be working with some pretty good people. Matt Kaulig really likes him. Kaulig Racing really likes him a lot. They like his personality. And maybe instead of parking it on the front stretch, he may be parking his way in a victory lane. And we know how Kaulig Racing is on super speedway, so I wouldn't be surprised he wins a super speedway race, and I think he's a pretty good super speedway racer. He's not an awful road course racer, so that's where their specialty is. Seems like that's what the specialty is for Kaulig Racing. But like I said, I think this is an amazing opportunity for him. I'm really happy and glad to see him getting a shot and opportunity to go full-time at Kaulig Racing heading into 2024. This is exciting. This is really, really great. I'm happy for him. And nonetheless, great to see a Josh Williams will be headed to Kaulig Racing in 2024. Really happy for him. Glad to see him going to Kaulig in 2024. So, that is going to today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and some more on Patreon as well. Links go to more of that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. How well do you think Josh Williams will perform at Kaulig Racing in 2024? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Jake Garcia joining ThorSport Racing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we'll have 2024 NASCAR Cup Series playoff predictions dropping on the channel. And then on Sunday, we're going to have the NASCAR Cup Series predictions dropping on the channel as well. Monday, more than likely, will be a team preview on the channel. Then Tuesday, we may end up having another special video coming out for 2024. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Got a lot of great content dropping on the channel that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.